Welcome to the New Creation Fellowship Church worship for August 16. This is our 22nd Sunday morning digital service. I'm glad that you made the choice to worship with us today. At New Creation, we seek to celebrate our differences as gifts and blessings. Our differences in color, gender, sexual orientation, and the many, many other ways that we are categorized by the world. You are welcome in our worship as we journey together, discerning how to follow Jesus more faithfully. Thank you for joining us in worship. Kristen has been doing a breath at the start of her online circle times. She did this one recently, and I asked if she could lead us through it in our worship this morning. Kristen was actually able to go back to that video and just pull out this little snippet of the time at the beginning of the circle time where she led this breath. So we actually get to join her as she did it that morning.
We're going to do 3 breaths today. I'm going to call this a mad face. Sometimes when people are mad, they look very mad with their eyebrows are down, their mouth even goes down or like crunched up. But I'm calling this a different kind of mad face, like that kind of mad where you feel angry inside. You feel mad about something. You're not saying anything. Maybe you're quiet and mad. The feeling of mad looks different ways. This is going to be a mad face. For this, I'll just put it right here so it can be seen. That's the mad. I'm going to call this the sad. That one maybe a lot of people would say, yeah, I feel like that represents sad, because the mouth is going down, and that's often a symbol we use for sad. Okay, so mad, sad. And there's a word that rhymes with mad, sad, and it's a different word for happy. So this is not supposed to be the happy sticker. There's another word that means happy, a synonym of it. Mad, sad, glad. Mad, sad, glad. We're going to do 3 breaths. We aren't going to try to get rid of any of these feelings. We're going to try to find them, because they might already be in you and you haven't even noticed them, or you haven't given them a breath yet. So the first one is a mad. The next one will be a sad. The third one, the last one, will be a glad. The mad breath is this. Think of something that you are mad about. Maybe it just happened. Maybe you just heard about it. Or maybe you're mad about something that happened a long time ago. Or maybe you're mad about something you heard about from someone else a long time ago. Think of that mad thing. And when we think of that mad thing, we're going to take a deep breath in, hold it, and we're going to breathe out. And that's one way to let that move through us. So it might not make the mad go away. It'll just let that mad thing move through you, though. So we're going to do a mad breath. I close my eyes. It helps me think of things that aren't happening right now in the room, since there's really nothing else happening in the room right now for me. I'm going to just close my eyes. I'm going to think about something that makes me mad. Sometimes it takes a little bit to really find it. I just found it. I'm thinking of the mad thing, and we're going to breathe in for 3 seconds, hold it, and breathe out for 4, like this. was my mad breath. The sad one, I've got it right away in my head. I found something out yesterday that I am still sad about. So I'm going to close my eyes. Think of a sad thing, something that's happened to you, something that happened to someone else, something you know about, something that you worry about, something sad. And let's think about it, find it. Let's breathe in for 3. Hold it and breathe out for 4. Last one is a glad breath. Sometimes if you've thought of things that make you mad, bring that mad feeling, things that bring you the sad feeling, it might be hard to find a glad feeling, but I think it's there. Even if you don't feel it, you know the glad thing. So there's something in your life that one time, even for a moment, was exciting, was funny, was silly, had you feeling loved, had you feeling proud. Those are glad things. Now I gotta find one because I don't have one in my head right now. So I'm gonna close my eyes and think about it. A glad thing, a happy thing. I'm trying to find the feeling right now too. Glad. I'm still looking, friends. Found it. Let's breathe in something that is a glad thing for us. Breathe in for 3. Hold it. Breathe out for 4. And let's start our day.
Thank you, Kristen, for leading us through that. Each Sunday, we light our peace lamp. I've understood this lighting as a lament of what is and a prayer for God's kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. This peace lamp burns in defiance of white privilege and systemic racism. This peace lamp burns in defiance of social inequality and injustice. This peace lamp burns in defiance of hatred, ignorance, and fear. This peace lamp burns in defiance of individualism and materialism. This peace lamp burns in defiance of nation fighting against nation. This peace lamp burns in defiance of those who desire to limit God's love and grace. This peace lamp burns in defiance, not to say that these things don't exist, but to say that God's justice does not have space for such things. That as followers of Jesus, we long for the peace of Christ to reign. So I light our peace lamp in the name of Jesus. May the light of the peace of Christ illuminate in the darkness, bringing peace to those who have no peace. Let us take a moment to center our hearts and our thoughts as we listen to our meditative music this morning. For our call to worship this morning, at the beginning of it, I have included a prayer of confession, one that was written by Joanna Herader, pastor at Peace Mennonite in Lawrence, Kansas. So I invite you to join me in this prayer. God of all people, our faith is weak, our egos are strong. Forgive us. Our energy is low. Our patience is short. Have mercy on us. Our prejudices are real. Our compassion is limited. Heal us. We gather to worship a God who is greater than our understanding, to be covered in grace more fully than we know, and to be enveloped by a love more passionate than we can comprehend. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Good morning, everyone. It's been a long time since I've seen your faces. And for the most part, if I've seen your faces, they've been covered by something like this, with a face mask, which is an important thing to do when you're with other people. But I'm here all alone at the church building right now, so I'm not going to need to wear it. I would like for you to think about joining with me and Brenda, Grandma Brenda, to do a little project. And it will involve being able to see other people's faces. We would like to update some of the photos and then get those to people, either electronically or on a big sheet of paper. So there's lots of little squares with people's family photos or something that we're not quite sure how we're going to do that part yet. But definitely it would be good to be able to have something to look at and remember our church family. And I'm sure there have been a lot of changes. I got permission to show you some of the photos that are out there now. And again, if this is of your family, or if you have seen these people, you will notice the changes right away. I just pulled a few of them. There we go. Miles and Christopher and Kathy. Look at Christopher. He's up to their shoulders, but I would guess he's grown a lot taller this summer and since March when we've last seen him in this church building. So let's see what's changed with Christopher, if that family would send a new photo into Brenda. Here's another one with somebody that has gotten a lot bigger. That's little Zeke. He was just a baby in this photo. We know that he is very energetic and loves to walk and run and talk, but let's see if we can get a new photo of Zeke so we can enjoy his smiling face and that of his parents and his brother Wally. Who are these people? Well, it's the Mock family. Well, 5 out of 6 of them. But Sawyer over here just graduated from high school. And his graduation photos showed that he looks quite a bit different than he did when this photo was taken. And actually, all of them do. Wearing hair different ways, sometimes glasses. Lots of those changes have happened since this photo of the Mock family. And this is one I find fun to look at because it's Kelvin and Brenda. I actually have had a chance to see them this summer. They don't look like that at all. Kelvin has a long ponytail. Both of them wear their hair differently and a different color than it is here. So if you saw them on the street, you might not even recognize them. But that's our dear Brenda and Kelvin. So if you have interest in updating your photo and then being able to see other people in your church family visually by having something at your house or on your computer, then we would welcome you letting Brenda know that at her Gmail at the NCFC officeassistant.com. Or you can let her know by Facebook or text that you have a photo to send to her. Just about any way will be fine. And we hope to have all those by the end of August and then be able to get something out for you all to enjoy sometime in September. All right. Well, I'm going to switch here to talking about this plant at the church. Instead of the people, we'll talk about the plant for just a few minutes. Behold the plant. We have had lots of parables on Sunday morning recently, and Pastor Derek and other people have taught about those. Some of those have been about plants. And I have a story, maybe it could be considered kind of like a parable about this particular plant. It is the only living plant at our church building. It gets plenty of light, but guess what? The person who was supposed to water it, me, forgot all about it once we stopped being here for our worship times together. Now it's the middle of August. If we back up, counting backwards on the months, then it'd be July, June, May, April, March. It's been 5 months since we've had any worship services or any activities here at the church building. Well, it got watered sometime in March, I think, but April, I think the whole month or longer, I totally forgot about it because we just weren't here for me to see it and remember. So I came here one day once I realized that, and I thought, oh, it's probably dead. I'll just carry it out and get it out here and take care of it. But no, it was doing fine. It actually was a little limp, but it was growing, it was beautiful, it was just fine. And this is a tropical type of plant, so it handled the heat without any air conditioning at that point, just really well. And once I got here, I watered it really well. There's 2 ways I water this plant. One is just a regular watering bucket, and the other is a old bottle. And the way this works is fill up the bottle with water. Oops, spilled a little, that's okay. And then, when I got it, as a gift actually, it came with a clay watering spout that you just leave in the dirt. You turn the bottle upside down into this and put it all in the dirt, and very gradually it lets water seep out. So that may be one way that helped the plant adapt to not being watered much. Well, since I'm here today, I thought I'd take care of this plant. I'm going to put on some gardening gloves. And it is really a pretty tall plant. I think it comes up to about my neck. But I'm sitting here and going to use the measuring tape and try to figure out how tall it is so you can see. Half of that leaf is right about 45 inches, which would be about 4 feet tall. Do you know anyone that's 4 feet tall? Well, they'd probably be a little shorter than this plant because I just I just measured it from the soil, the top of the pot onward. And while I'm here, I think I'll just take care of this yellow leaf that's on it. It's not coming off, so I'll use my handy dandy clippers. Do not try this at home, because these are sharp. I'm gonna clip this off. There, and that's better. But you know what? This plant's getting pretty wobbly. Maybe I better do some more trimming. Oh no! I cut off the plant. It was a beautiful plant. But I'm not too worried because that plant has proven itself to be pretty adaptable. And look at this. There are some new plants already starting. You see that? So once again, I hope it will be just fine. So the meaning of this little story is that we can be pretty adaptable, I think, even when we don't get the things we usually get to help us keep going and keep growing. And we will help each other in ways that we can to keep going and keep growing and try to have faith that, yes, we can be full and alive and enjoy life in these days. Goodbye for now.
Matthew 7:7 through 11. Ask and it will be given you. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks the door will be opened. Is there anyone among you who, if your child asks for bread, will give a stone? Or if a child asks for a fish, will give a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Matthew 14:13 through 21. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When they went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages to buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Matthew 15:21 through 38. Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. After Jesus had left that place, he passed along the Sea of Galilee, and he went up the mountain where he sat. Great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the maimed, the blind, the mute, and many others. They put them at his feet, and he cured them. So that the crowd was amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed whole, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. Then Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I have compassion for the crowd, because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, for they might faint on the way." The disciples said to him, Where are we to get enough bread in the desert to feed so great a crowd?" Jesus asked them, "How many loaves have you?" They said, 7 and a few small fish. Then ordering the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and after giving thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all of them ate and were filled, and they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. Those who had eaten were 4,000 men, besides women and children.
This week's readings come from the Gospel of Matthew, from part of Jesus' life where he's engaged in his earthly ministries. The second and the last stories might be familiar to you, may seem like they're very similar stories, and sometimes they're both called the feeding of the multitude. They look a lot the same, but they've got some important differences between them, and it's the story in the middle, the story of the Canaanite woman, that I think illustrates why these two stories are different, or makes the difference happen. So let's start with the first story from Matthew 14. In this passage, Jesus is in Galilee, teaching to a Jewish audience, and he uses 5 loaves and 2 fishes to feed 5,000 people, which is actually an underestimate because, as the end of the passage tells us, that's not even counting the women and children. When he suggests this dinner plan to his disciples, they very predictably object that it's not possible. But it happens anyway. And the nature of the miracle here is not really clear. Is this some kind of regenerating bread where you take off a little bit and it grows back into a full loaf like a starfish? Or is this maybe like one of those little sponge toys that you put in water and it grows into a dinosaur? Right? Could you take a little pinch of bread and you put it in your stomach and it grows to fill up your stomach? Or maybe it's like my wildest dream, an actual never-ending bread bowl. No matter how much bread you take out of it, there's always more. Well, I think there may have actually been a different miracle here in the works. And we don't know, of course, but biblical scholars have suggested that the crowd would have done what was typical for people of that time period, and is pretty typical of us. They would have packed their lunches, just like we put a granola bar in the diaper bag or a PBJ in our glove compartment when we're going on a long trip. They would have carried some food with them because there's no restaurants, there's no vending machines, there's no food trucks. And so they would have been used to carrying their food, probably in the inside pocket of their tunic, so it didn't get dusty and dirty. But in a crowd this large, full of people who are poor and ill, not everyone would have had food with them. And that would have led to this very awkward problem. Do you take your sandwich out and eat it in front of people who are hungry? Would you have shared it with them? And how many pieces could you have cut your lunch into and shared before there was really not a meaningful amount left for anybody? You cut one sandwich into 100 pieces, nobody's full. And anyway, why should you have to? Why should you have to share? You remembered your lunch. You worked hard for the money that pays for your lunch. But if you don't share, that's selfish. That's a violation of rules of hospitality. So we get this tension in the crowd. Who's going to break out their sandwich first and eat it in front of these poor people who don't have any? Well, Jesus tells his disciples not to worry about any of that, to just start sharing the bread that they do have. Right? They say, no, it can't work. He says, just go ahead and do it. Just do step 1, and we'll see what happens next. And in doing so, the disciples modeled the solution to the problem of facing the 5,000. Some people had and some people had not. And the disciples showed them that the solution to this problem was simply to share. When people saw this, they responded with generosity. And I think that's possibly the miracle. That doesn't discount supernatural factors or regenerating bread or an endless bread bowl. But could this be miracle enough that simply people share what they have when they wouldn't have done that before? Well, in their generosity, they discover there's an abundance. There's 12 extra baskets of bread. Everybody's fed, and they had more than enough. From here, the disciples and Jesus move on, arriving near Tyre and Sidon, the passage described in Matthew 15. And again, we get the sense that he's on retreat, but again, he's interrupted by someone else's needs. A Canaanite woman, not only not Jewish, but the generations-old enemy of Jewish people. She asks for his help. Her daughter is possessed by demons, and this must make the girl very difficult to manage. And how many parents, when their children become too hard, toss them out? But this woman, she loves her daughter so much that she runs a gamut. She literally has to walk past Jesus's disciples who are ready to be so cruel to her. We're about to find out just how unfriendly they are. But she braves this because of her desperate love for her child and her faith in Jesus. We see this image over and over in the Gospels. Women who want to know Jesus being intimidated and dismissed by his best friends. But she persists and places herself squarely in his way. She approaches Jesus boldly, shouting. She asks for mercy. She recognizes Jesus' authority as well as his Jewish heritage. Remember, she's only not Jewish. She's actually from a people that the early Israelites believed that they were told to destroy. We see here her humility, but also her courage and her faith. She approaches him anyway because she believes that he can heal her daughter. And there's simply no other reason to risk this encounter. And Jesus responds with silence. This seems like a hard passage. And if you've read this before and thought, wow, Jesus is a jerk, I don't blame you. I think on the surface, that's really how it looks. This silence is so cold for a woman who is shouting. There's a difference between her shout and her urgency and his cold silence. It feels so significant. But I think Jesus isn't really ignoring her. I think it's the silence that teachers use when we wait for our students to work through a problem. It's an old college teaching trick to not give the students the answer, but to let the silence stretch out awkwardly, however long it takes, before someone says something, a student says something, that starts working us towards the solution. Because if we jump in too fast and tell them what the answer is, they'll always come to rely on us to give it to them. But the wrestling with it is where the learning happens, more than the just knowing it. And so Jesus waits for his disciples. He waits, and then they get it wrong. Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us. They see the evidence of her need, her desperate shouting, as a burden to them, rather than as a burden to her that they have the authority to lift off and the ability to lift off of her. So Jesus, he tries to help them out in this teachable moment. I was only sent for the lost sheep of Israel. That's what he states. That is, he's only here for the Jews. Well, the disciples would have probably liked that. But this statement's a trick. If we look back at verse 21, where are they? That tells us the location. They're in Tyre and Sidon. These are not Jewish places. They're Gentile places. But he came here on purpose, right? So how could he be sent only for the Jews if he is actually in a place where there's Gentiles? When he says, I was only sent for the lost sheep of Israel, he's articulating the prejudices and limitations that his disciples have. Look around. That's what he's really saying. If I weren't here to minister to people like this woman, why would I even be here in the first place? We didn't come here to minister only the Jews. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So she helps him in this illustration. I kind of imagine that maybe Jesus even gives her a little wink, lets her know, you're in on this, right? I got you. I'm going to take care of you. Let's see if we can bring your classmates along to greater understanding. So she steps forth and she's humble before him as a person of faith before her Messiah. The disciples are silent. Perhaps they're starting to get the idea that their previous answer was the wrong one, right? Because she's not being sent away, right? She's staying put. The encounter is getting closer. They can't seem to imagine, though, that Jesus really means what he says, that if you walk with him, you're going to walk into enemy territory, and then you're going to heal people there. You're going to actually love your enemy. Jesus tries to help them out again, like teachers do, right? He gives them a hint. Should dogs eat bread that was intended for children? Is that fair? And we often focus on the word dog here, which is so startling. In no other passage do we see Jesus insulting a person who's already hurt, right? Ridiculing a person who's already low in status. So I think for that reason alone, we shouldn't assume that that's what Jesus is doing here, because it would be so out of character. Instead, I think he is again putting into words the prejudices of his disciples. He's about to heal this woman. Therefore, she must be a child of God, just like the Jews he's already been healing, and not a dog like his disciples have been taught to think of Canaanite women. The other key word here, though, is bread. It's a little hint, again, that we give to students, right? We're calling back to something that we've already taught them. Come on. So the answer has to do with bread. Think about bread. How will bread help us understand this woman's situation? Well, that word bread, that should remind them from the earlier lesson from Matthew 7, the first passage we heard. If a child asks a parent for bread, Jesus asks, the parent will give him, right, this is from the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, so they're going through, okay, if you ask, a child asks for bread, a parent gives him a stone. No, not a stone, not a stone. Let's try it again, says Jesus. If a child asks for a fish, the parent will give him a snake. The disciples wonder. No, says Jesus. No, of course that's not how the passage goes, right? Jesus assures us that a parent will provide bread and fish, not stones and snakes, to their children. And therefore God, who is the perfect parent, will of course care for us. But the metaphor there, that God will care for us, relies on understanding the literal point first, which is that we care for each other. If someone searches, they find. If they ask, Jesus answers. If they knock, he opens the door. If they need bread or fish, he gives them food. And if they need healing, he heals them. The word bread should also remind them of the 12 baskets that they had just gathered up a short time before. The miracle of feeding the 5,000, in that miracle, they were practicing for feeding this woman in this moment. The lesson of that miracle is that there is always enough in God's kingdom. Not only are there crumbs for the dog, there are whole loaves left over for the dog. When those disciples fed the 5,000 Jews, they didn't ask if they were deserving, if they were worthy, if they were faithful. They just knew that they were hungry. That's the only criteria. How much more then should they embrace this woman whose faith allows her to brave their scorn? But despite practicing this for literally 5,000 times, the disciples still didn't get it. Now, we know that Jesus was tempted by Satan in the desert, but I imagine there might have been other times when Jesus was tempted, like tempted to leave these sorry disciples and walk away. How could you not get it? How could you not get it? He could have taken this woman as a disciple, right? A woman who believed before she ever saw. Instead of this junior varsity team of jokers who see 5,000 times and still can't apply it once themselves. There's another passage in Matthew 15 where Jesus says, how could you be so dull, right? How you are not sharp, you are not getting it, you are not paying attention. I get the frustration here because I have it for the disciples too. But then there are disciples because they need to be discipled. That is, they need to be formed in the faith. And I shouldn't get frustrated with them because God has been good to me every day of my life, which is more than 5,000 times. And I have gotten to witness God's love for me over and over again. And yet every day, just like the disciples, I wake up and I'm faced with the same temptation to limit God's love. Right? Every day I risk making the same mistake, to try to limit God's love to the people who I consider worthy. And I define their worth according to how close they are to my identity. And it's not a surprise then that the disciples wrestled with this, and I think it is the biggest struggle that the church faces today. We are convinced that we should respond to God's gracious and abundant love by setting limits on those we share it with, as if it is bread and there are only 5 loaves. We know there are not 5 loaves. There are as many loaves as we choose to share. We expect God miraculously to make more bread, but we fail to perform the miracle of sharing it ourselves. The point of this story isn't that the disciples should be nice to someone different than them or someone they think of as inferior. It's the point is that their idea of inferiority has to leave. It's done. It's over. We're released from it. We have to eradicate it. It has to fall. And that requires no change at all on the part of the Canaanite woman. She doesn't have to do anything at all to prove her worth or value or dignity. She arrives with it. They simply have to recognize it. All the work is on their end. Jesus didn't ask the Canaanite woman to be less Canaanite. He sends her away for her daughter to go meet her daughter, out of sight, both of them, and fully healed. It's a healing for their whole family. He doesn't send her away with a to-do list about what she needs to change, what she needs to change about her culture or her language or her history or her identity. Her Canaaniteness is totally okay with Jesus. And instead, he teaches his disciples that they have to abandon their ethnocentrism, their bigotry, their prejudice. And as with every story Jesus tells, it's the people with the most power who have to change the most. The only demand we see here is on them, not on her. So do they get it? Well, let's look at what happens right after the healing of the Canaanite woman's daughter. Jesus and his disciples engage in another festival of healing, 3 days of healing. They're restoring health and in the process healing spirits and repairing relationships. And the people they are healing, they're the people of Tyre and Sidon, just where they found the Canaanite woman. The people they are healing are not Jews. They're Gentiles, but they rush towards Jesus with desperation and faith, and he has compassion on them. Just like the individual Canaanite woman rushed toward Jesus with faith, and he had compassion for her. Compassion means co-suffering. That means fundamentally he identifies with their pain because he understands their bodies to work in the same way as his. He says, in this compassion, we must have the same body. This is radically different than how his disciples thought about the Canaanite woman as a dog. His compassion affirms their bodies, even the ones they have been told are so broken that they have to be outcast. This is an act of radical solidarity and equality. These people are so committed that they stay for 3 days to be healed. And now after 3 days, they need food. So Jesus, seeing this need, addresses it. He tells his disciples to feed them. And they again point out the obvious. They're in the desert. There's no grocery store around. There's no restaurants. There's no delivery. And Jesus asks them, how much bread do we have? Again, he's saying, the solution to the problem starts with our generosity. Last time they were confronted with this logic, the disciples argued back, saying that feeding a crowd of several thousand people with just a few loaves wasn't possible. But this time they don't. And maybe by now they're starting to trust Jesus. Could you really tell Jesus no a second time when you've seen this miracle already happen? What's more remarkable to me is that they obey him even though he is telling them to feed thousands of people they have been socialized to believe are beyond redemption. It's not just that they feed them, it's who they're feeding. Did Jesus come only for the lost sheep of Israel? No, he tells them in his command that they heal and now feed these hungry Gentiles. Do even dogs get crumbs? We're not talking about dogs. We're not talking about dogs, he says. We're talking about people whose bodies are precious to God, as are our own. It's time to stop talking about them as outside of God's love or God's kingdom. And once again, he does not tell the Gentiles to stop being Gentiles. only that the disciples must stop being racist. And they learned this lesson because of the Canaanite woman. They learned it from her like they weren't able to learn it when they fed 5,000 people who were like themselves. Believing that God loved people like themselves didn't deepen their faith. If you think God loves people like you, and that's all the farther your faith takes you, it's not very far. But seeing that God loved people unlike themselves challenges them, and they start to grow. But God is gracious to us as we learn to love and live with each other better. God will show us grace 5,000 times, even if we don't see it, and then God will show us grace some more until we understand how it works and how to extend it ourselves, just like our disciples extend their own bread. God gives us people unlike ourselves in our lives to help us grow in grace. The Canaanite woman came looking for healing for her daughter and by extension for her family, despite great risk to herself, including humiliation from the disciples. Her courage produced a deeper faith from the disciples, who slowly learned to expand their hearts. May we too be inspired by her courage and able to see and hear and serve those who call us to this greater grace.
Thank you for joining us in our worship this morning. I'm grateful that you were here with us. Now, as you go from this worship into your week, I pray that God would bless you and keep you, that the very face of Jesus would shine upon you and be gracious to you, that the Holy Spirit would embrace you and give you peace. Amen. Blessings to you as you go in peace.